those are the people I truly serve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of a man.
I'm Thomas Alvin. This is Year Zero. Today, I have the great pleasure of chatting with Reed Coverdale and Adam Patrick. As most of you know, Reed and Adam had a little spat on Twitter, and I wanted to get them together because I knew that they would have a great conversation if they could get past whatever Twitter does to a person's mind. So I invited them on. We sat down. We really didn't touch on the argumentation that had taken place. I think they both acknowledged that things were said in ways that they disagreed with. And we really dug into some meat and potatoes of what we're experiencing on Twitter as far as the arguments between libertarians and quote unquote post-libertarians, if that's what you want to call them. I know that's not what Adam chooses as a label, and he is not capable of speaking for each and every person in that kind of movement or thought process at this point in time. But we were able to touch on problems we see with libertarians and libertarianism, a little bit of spirituality, post-libertarianism, and we finish up with the idea of the anarch, which is something that Adam has talked about in the past and that he really sees as the way forward for people. So I think you will all get a lot out of this conversation. It's a long one, but it was a good conversation, and I really enjoyed it. And so I think you will too. RyanBunting.com for all of your graphic design needs. Go to RyanBunting.com. Ryan Bunting is a great libertarian and a great anarcho-capitalist. He's also a great graphic designer. He designed my podcast logo and Pete Quinones' podcast logo for Free Man Beyond the Wall. So go to RyanBunting.com for all of your graphic design needs and grab his book, Project Manicore. You'll like it. Thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. And make sure you go to the libertarianinstitute.org/donate and give us some money. We need your money, honey, because this is our fall fund drive and we are trying to keep our lights on for next year. So help fund the Libertarian Institute for another year by going to libertarianinstitute.org/donate. And keep us rolling, man. We're doing a good job. We're growing. We have a lot of great writers that are writing over there, a lot of great podcasts, and then there's me. So go to libertarianinstitute.org/donate. All right. Enjoy the show. This computer? Of course it is. Hello, hello, hello. I am here with two people I consider good friends. Reed Coverdale. What's up, Bubba?
I'm doing good. I'm not on Twitter anymore, but that actually, increases the value of life, I would say. So doing pretty well.
Your mental health is better.
Yes.
And Adam Patrick, what's going on, bro?
What's up, brother? I unfortunately still am on Twitter, and so I can't be in the same peaceful place with my mental health as Reed. So
I think
thank you for having me on.
I think we're all in a position where it's just like, can I just get kicked off now? I'm tired of this shit. Can I just get kicked off? Because I can't stop doing it on my own. Will you please stop it for me?
Yeah, I mean, Twitter's weird. It is a great tool. for networking. I mean, if I didn't have Twitter, I wouldn't have gotten to know Dave Smith, Scott Horton, Pete Quinones, you, pretty much everybody. I mean, that's where I got in contact with almost everyone. But at the same time, it does paint a false picture of humanity and a false picture of people that you think you know personally, because you don't until you actually, I mean, I'd say podcasting, you get to know people, but definitely through Twitter spats, you don't. So not the healthiest medium to judge humanity by.
Right. Right.
It's one of those things, like social media is one of those things where if you treat it like real life, it's going to backfire rather quickly. And I've always tried to use it for messaging or marketing, whether it was in my previous career, it was about promoting, what we would be doing events or something at this bar or that restaurant, or promoting this product. And then with this, whatever this is that we're in, it was kind of networking, I guess, or more exploring. But yeah, you're right. Like if you look at it as some sort of extrapolation of the real world, it's probably going to let you down. And I think everyone sort of tries to figure out the best way to use it. And we're all human and nobody's perfect. So it's all a learning experience to try to get through it, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I caught the other day, the wife tweeted something out, and she doesn't have but, I don't know, 40 or 50 followers. It's just people we've met at different events or whatever that follow her and that she follows. And Pete shared one of the tweets that she tweeted out. And I don't know, the tweet she tweeted out was perfectly rational as far as I was concerned. I saw it, and I obviously liked it because my wife said it, and if I don't like it, I don't get laid that night. But somebody said you're babbling and making no sense, and I was just like, how dare you talk to my wife that way? You're a cunt and you need to suck my dick or some shit. Like, because I was just like, no, you're not gonna talk to my wife that way. And I woke up the next morning and I was just like, I don't even want to interact with this person like that. Why did I even say anything? It's not like they were like at my house, like talking shit, It's not like they were in my face talking shit, but there's this internet pride you got to keep up, and it's like, whatever, man. Like, if you were here and you were talking shit to my wife to her face, I would show you what kind of man I am. I don't have to do that online. And it's unnecessary.
Yeah. And you also don't know, like, is that person trolling? Are they being genuine? Is there a real human being behind there? Are they some bot? Like, you don't even know the motive of the person because you probably never interacted with them before. Right. And then also, like, I'm aware that your wife has a Twitter profile. Like, I'm not going to share it with anybody. Like, that's also strange. I mean, no, disrespect to anybody who did, but there's certain things I think you just don't touch. Just be my take.
Oh no, she was excited. I mean, she tweeted out a picture of her wearing a Scott Horton shirt and telling a story about somebody talking about abortion being wrong, but bombing kids in the Middle East being okay. And so she was excited that people saw, this interaction. Like, it wasn't that. It was just like, who the fuck are you and what are you talking about? And it was, my first reaction was like, I have to protect you, and this is Twitter. This isn't real life. I'm not at the grocery store face to face with somebody who's being a total dick. And sometimes it's hard to remember that, because you interact so much on Twitter that it's hard to remember this isn't reality in any way, shape, or form. At least any reality that I'm aware of, throughout my life prior to 2011. So it's one of those things.
Yeah, I've only had Twitter. I only had it for about a year. And I did 18.8 thousand followers. So it did get pretty crazy pretty quickly. But one thing I would do on there is if somebody came at me with a retarded take or with arrogance or with any attitude, I would just give it right back to them. So if someone had an honest question, I would, I wouldn't belittle them. But if they came at me, from a place of looking down already or already judging me or something like that, I would just give them their own medicine right back. And if they got more angry, then I would just, I'd just give it right back to them. So I think that, a lot of people walk into a conversation in the middle of it and they'll see that altercation and they won't realize what's going on. And they'll think that you're a complete asshole or that you're just there to belittle people. But at least for me, that wasn't really the case. I think I tried to give people a fair shot while I was on there. But if you come at me belligerent, the only people that I would not give a fair shot were neocons or, Meghan McCain or what was her name? Marianne Williamson. Those people, they would just get the belligerence right away. But I feel like they deserve that anyway.
Yeah, your interaction with Marianne Williamson was pretty epic. Like
one of my proudest moments on there for sure.
The fact that she thought it benefited her in any way to respond was the best part of it. One of the best Twitter profiles is fucking El Popo, because he gets on there and he gets these. It's like, how do you get these blue check marks going back and forth with you like that? Like you're just boss when it comes to that shit, And I love that. It just makes me laugh so much.
Yeah,
that is my dogs. Yeah.
I almost had my dog come on for the beginning of this, but I knew I wouldn't be able to get him out of the room. So you want to come say hi to Tom. No,
I have the door closed. The door's closed. They're just, they know I'm in here. They hear me talking and they're like, I got to get a piece of this. So. All right. So let's get into some meat and potatoes here, because that's what the people are here for. One of the things that people are fighting about on Twitter constantly, especially the last week, man, and it's driven me up the damn wall, because there's a lot of people I like on both sides of this argument, and I'm just like, you aren't understanding each other, you're talking past each other, and I don't know a way to get you to stop talking past each other. Is this idea of post-libertarianism. Now, there's not one person labeled as a post-libertarian that accepts that moniker, so I'm not going to put it on anybody. But the term's been floated out there. And I think what I'm gathering is post-libertarianism is agorism with the state. That's kind of the way it comes across to me. And what they're trying to get across, which is something that I've noticed as well, and it doesn't go for every libertarian, but it goes for a lot of libertarians. And it's something that a lot of libertarians fail to acknowledge or address, is that a lot of libertarians are focused on rights and refuse to address responsibilities. And that's kind of what I'm getting out of the quote unquote post-libertarianism. I think all three of us have our own individual criticisms of libertarianism and what it brings to the table. Not the philosophy itself, maybe not the economics, but the people it attracts, the way that they are pushing the ideology. I abandoned the term libertarian in 2018 and went with free market, free marketeer, free market capitalist, free market anarchist, market anarchist. I was calling myself everything but a libertarian. since 2018 because I recognized very quickly the type of people that it was attracting. And it's attracting a lot of deadbeats that don't want the responsibility that the three of us take on in our daily lives. And I think that's a big issue. And I think that the issue of responsibilities does need to be talked about. And it's something I focus my podcast on a lot. But as I said, we all have our own individual criticisms of libertarianism. So I want to let y'all kind of like hash out some of these criticisms and some of what y'all see with this post-libertarian movement and with the criticisms of libertarianism, and see if we can't work through some of this, because it's very annoying to see this every day on the Twitter feed.
Yeah, I think maybe it would be best to first go over libertarianism, the criticisms there, because then we'll be talking about the solution, and then we could probably disagree on some, or, you know, I don't know, talk that out afterward. Do you want to do it that way? Or? Yeah,
we can do it that way. That's fine. That's fine. I don't have it. I didn't have it like written down in stone which direction we were going to go. I had these ideas in mind that I'm like, these are the things that we can actually have a discussion on and actually make some headway.
Yeah. Well, my criticism, I think the criticism shouldn't really be of libertarianism, but of libertarians as people. I think a lot of them have been very unimpressive, both candidates and just libertarians, you know, in life. I mean, if you think of a libertarian, you don't think of successful businessman or upstanding father or, you know, amazing community member, which are all things you should think of or you'd like to think of, but it's just not what comes across. You think of some guy who does heroin and owns machine guns, you know, and that's about it. And I think that, you know, I'm also an atheist, and I think you have this problem with a lot of atheists too, that because atheists don't believe in, you know, an afterlife or retribution for their sins or whatever, a lot of them will use that as an excuse to be degenerate assholes and, you know, not care about anything, not care about anyone. And some of them, I think, haven't even approached the conclusion that there isn't a God. They actually just, you know, they find the idea, oh, without God, I don't have to worry about any of my actions coming to any sort of punishment. So I am going to believe that so that I can live how I want. And then you also have libertarian.
I was just going to, I was just going to say, it's kind of like that Mark Twain had that comment that he said, if you're atheist with morals, you're good for nothing. Meaning that you have no reason to stick to your morals. And they kind of adopt that they personify that kind of ideal.
Yeah, and that's a whole different conversation on, you know, morality and belief in God and everything. But You're right. Like, a lot of them do adopt that. So instead of arriving honestly at a conclusion philosophically, they just realize, oh, if I think this, then that means I can also do this, this, and this. And I think there are a lot of libertarians who have not arrived at the idea of self-ownership or, you know, individualism or bodily autonomy, any of those things. It's just, oh, I can smoke weed. Oh, I can, you know, live a degenerate lifestyle and there's not going to be consequences. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. So because of that, you end up with a lot of these types who are not big on responsibility, who don't care about other people, who don't care about their legacy at all. So I don't think it's a problem with the philosophy. I think it's just, I just think it's a given that you're going to have people like that who come along. I mean, because you have them everywhere, you have them in every movement, but that's how they end up in this movement because of the things you can get away with the philosophy. That's why they're here instead of being here for the philosophy. So I actually want to see more impressive libertarians. And, I'd like to see them take the name libertarian, maybe not even in the party if they're not into voting or into party politics or whatever. But I actually, in the opposite of you guys, I didn't, or I don't know about you, Adam, but of you, Tommy, like I did not go by libertarian until last year. I would just tell people I was independent because I just didn't want any association with the label. Yeah. But I think it is a beautiful philosophy, and I think it really could solve a lot of our problems. But I would agree with the post-libertarians that just thin libertarianism isn't enough to be an impressive person or to live to your fullest potential. And to have leaders, you need leaders who are, going to believe in something beyond just not hurting people and taking their stuff, because that's an extreme basement level, the basement level philosophy right there. Like that really should just be the foundation for how you live. And then beyond that, you need things to fill that. You need passion. You need, for some people it's religion. For some people it's family. For some people it's, their occupation, whatever. You need something beyond just the idea of not hurting people and taking their stuff. So that would be my biggest criticism of libertarians in general.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty good. I'm not really sure why it is that I started even talking about libertarianism in the first place on this show that I do, other than the fact that they were the first people who reached out and wanted to have a conversation. I was more really concerned with trying to figure out why 2019 and 2020 happened, right? Like I'd only been calling myself a libertarian since maybe like 2008, 2009. I'd never heard that word before, but I'd always called myself an anarchist, kind of in the like the Rage Against the Machine Fight Club style anarchist growing up, junior high school. I mean, I'm almost 40, so we're going back to like the mid 90s. I would call myself an anarchist. There was no Wikipedia. I didn't look it up. I just know on certain rock albums and shit, people would talk about, smash the system, fuck authority,
anarchy and
shit
UK.
Like that. Sure. Like, and I didn't even know what that meant. I just knew that I was a kid in the 90s and didn't want someone to tell me what to do. And so you take on a term, right? And then you go about your life and you never really think about it. And the first time I ever heard libertarianism, it was like 2008, Ron Paul. He didn't say it, but when I started asking people on, MySpace or Facebook, like, what is this guy and what is he talking about? Because it's, I just gotten out of the military. I was out of the military in 2005. I joined right after 9/11. Had a very large social and political awakening there. And the guy sounded like he was talking to me. And so I was like, okay, libertarianism, that's a thing. Like, let me look into that. And something about it just always kind of rubbed me wrong, but I didn't I would get into these anarchy versus minarchy debates and like the Jason Stapleton Facebook group and stuff. And I always kind of found myself sort of siding with the minarchists, but I didn't really know why. So I don't know what post-libertarianism is. I know that Pete Quinones used it in the title of an episode once, and it just became this thing. I don't consider myself that. I don't really consider myself anything. I just felt like like the two of you and many of the listeners, hopefully all of them, but I'll just say many, lived through COVID-19. And I looked around and went, well, this isn't working. Right? Whatever message people who call themselves libertarians or anarcho-capitalists or whatever, that message did not resonate, or no one's heard of it, or they've heard of it and they don't want to accept it. Because what the fuck is happening right now? Like, my industry is shut down. Like, I was fine. It was cool to have 2 months off, but like a lot of people were not cool with that. And I just wanted to know why. Like, why is this being allowed to happen? Why is it being cheered on by at least half of society around me? And so I started just asking questions and going back and looking into history to try to figure out the answer to that. And I made a point to not do that from the basis of being an ideologue, right? I wasn't going to explore it from the position of being an anarchist or a libertarian or in anything. I was like, I'm open to whatever. I will talk to whomever. I just want to figure this fucking shit out. And I guess when you say that, you know, if you can get away with it or get away with things like degeneracy or, you know, the stuff that we probably, at least at this point in my life, I wouldn't subscribe to in the philosophy, what is that philosophy then? If it's that interpretable in so many different ways with so many different people, like maybe that's where it's going wrong. But at the end of the day, I don't really care, because other than Liberty Twitter, I know like 5 libertarians in my real life, you know, like, and probably, I don't know, you guys probably do too. If you think about who you haven't met through going through this process, probably most of the people you met are Republicans, Democrats, or they don't pay attention to politics at all. And I'd rather speak to them because I feel like they're like more interested in having this conversation. So, yeah, I don't really think at the end of the day, the libertarianism question matters outside of a very small group of people. It's an interesting conversation to have, but I think there's a larger conversation worth having as to what exactly we're doing and why we're doing it. And should we be doing it? And I really mean that. Should we be doing that? Were we sold a cultural, socioeconomic, political bill of goods, you know, 300 to 600 years ago? That's just entirely bullshit. And we are living through something we are not biologically or mentally programmed to live through, because somebody tricked us into doing it. And that's kind of where I'm at. That's kind of what I want to explore. And, you know, I don't really care who that bothers, because I'm not doing this for any other reason than to find the answer for myself. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. It's libertarianism it's like anything else. It's what anyone wants it to be. You know, it's not definable. It's not a rock or a microphone or a mouse or a pen. You know, what is it? It's what you decided it was today. And to me, that's just not good enough. That doesn't work for me. I need more than that. I need a better answer than that. And that's not on anybody here. You know, there might not be an answer to that. I just want to keep exploring it until I can, until I run out of exploration, I guess.
Yeah, I think
that's
you want to add
I was
something,
just,
Tommy.
yeah, no, I was just going to say that's like that's an evolutionary biology kind of approach to politics, which is interesting. It's something that it triggers with me, Brett Weinstein, and the way he talks about how society in industry, and I'm actually reading this book. Actually, Ted Kaczynski wrote about this too, but I'm reading this book, Future Shock by Alvin Toffler. It's really interesting. It was written in 1971. My buddy Coop told me about it, and it talks about how industry technology like kind of surpasses the ability for the human mind to keep up, because evolutionarily we only we came upon modern humanity so quickly. It took millions of years to get here, and then suddenly everything sped up because of the speed of which technology took place. And so it fucked with our brain, because biologically we can't keep up with the rate at which technology is advancing. And so it's really fucking with us, right? And it causes depression and all these problems within us that we're just unable to cope with. And so you see like the increase in the amount of people on pharmaceuticals and things of that nature. So it really sounds like your questions are kind of revolving around that bigger scope and that bigger idea of what is happening with with humanity in general, with these, you know, technological advances that we're experiencing. And you're almost 40, I'm 42, so you and I in our lives, we've seen society completely flip. And it's like, okay, this is like a movie now. I mean, this is it's really, we're living in what we would have watched as a movie in 1990 is we're living in that as a reality. And it's like, okay, that was never going to be reality as far as I was concerned. That was always this fiction, this other place. And now I'm there. I'm in the middle of it. And how do I function within this?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I want to respond to that, but obviously I want to hear what Reed had to say.
Oh, yeah. No, I definitely want to let both of y'all talk, but it just, what you said just flipped that switch in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you go first, Adam, and then I'll say what I had to say.
Well, it's sort of like this strange, narrow perspective that it's very easy to fall into the trap of. Right. And I could see it in myself at times, too. I've sort of trained myself the last maybe 18 months to try to stay out of it. But it's sort of like history started, when our parents were born, and we can only see as far as the current sci-fi movies let us see. And, it's not like we don't know that there's a 3000 BC that it existed. Like we can do math. We know it existed, but it's almost like our thought processes don't allow us to maneuver or question anything past the paradigm that we're living in. It's almost like the reason that something like libertarianism, because I assume most of the people who are going to be listening to the show would consider themselves libertarian or libertarian leaning or something like that, that somehow that's something that has been around like forever. Libertarianism, as we know it, like anarcho-capitalism, is like less than a century old, right? And then the idea of even individual liberty and economic freedom, while you can kind of take that back to the late Neolithic and say, well, obviously people didn't want their shit taken from them by an opposing tribe, it really isn't the same thing that we're talking about now, right? It kind of is, but it really isn't. And so it's really difficult to have that conversation, because once you want to have it, many people will just say, well, if you're not a libertarian as defined by X in the book Y that I agree with, you are an authoritarian, fascist, Nazi, crazy person that wants to run my life. And you're like, or I'm like, where did that even come from? Like, why would that even be your response to this? Like, isn't that weird? That's the thing you would say? Like, where does that come from? Who told you to say that? Where did you learn that from? Because you didn't pop out of the womb thinking that thought. So who is being parroted there? Like, I'm not going to get into that because that's somebody else saying something. But I think once you start questioning that and then you get those responses back, you're like, well, this is sort of telling me I'm on the right track, isn't it? It's sort of telling me I'm sniffing in the right direction. Because if that is not a response you would have gotten 200-300 years ago, or really for like all of human history. And is that natural or unnatural? Is it a progression? Is it a learning process? And if it is it a good one? And like, what is good? What are we trying to accomplish here? I assume like not the extinction of the human race or like being miserable in our day-to-day lives. So what are we trying to accomplish? Or are we, right? That's another word that libertarians don't like. But like as a society, really, are we trying to accomplish something? Or are we trying to hurt each other? Like, what is the point of all of this? And I think that's where you can get on Twitter and get frustrated with people when they're talking about something in a way that just seems so, I don't have a good word for it, amateurishness. It's like, okay, well, at least ask the question. Like, why are you, not you guys, but like, why is someone so sure this is the right way to live? Did you figure that out on your own, or did someone tell you that? Like, why won't you allow yourself to question it? Why are you so certain? So I don't know, that's what I was thinking when you were talking about evolutionary biology. It's like, well, what did you evolve from? What is most of human history? It's not this. Like this, what we're living through right now, the way we're talking, this conversation we're having, and these ideas and concepts, this is all like an anomaly, an abnormality in human history. So where did it come from? Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the mistake a lot of people make is they're trying to find morality and fulfillment and reason for being alive, or, you know, just like they're trying to find the fullest extent of existence through libertarianism. And this goes for both libertarians and people who are leaving libertarianism. And I think that's a mistake. I don't think libertarianism is going to be fulfilling and give you a joyous, happy, amazing, exciting life. I don't think it does. I think libertarianism is an extremely skeletal philosophy, which is just don't hurt people, don't take their stuff. And I mean, it all pretty much boils down to that. You own yourself, you own your property. No one else has a right to, you know, control your property or your body other than yourself. And pretty much everything builds out from there. But that doesn't get into generosity, forgiveness, any of these things that throughout the human experience we've come to, you know, we've come to desire and realize give us more fulfillment. It's kind of like you have a car and it's a decent car and it gets you where you need to go, but you have shitty drivers who keep driving this car, and people are trying to look for good driving out of the car instead of realizing that the people driving the car suck. So you have a bunch of shitty people who are trying to drive this car and try to, you know, become a race car driver, but instead of fixing their own skills and actually becoming good drivers, they just blame the car. And then you have a bunch of people saying, fuck this, I'm done with this, this car sucks. And it's like, well, maybe you should have kicked the idiot who's in the driver's seat out and put somebody impressive who actually knows what he's doing in there. So I just think that the mistake is looking for all of the solutions in libertarianism, because I don't think all of the solutions do exist there. I mean, a lot of the stuff we're talking about with technology taking over and replacing human activity, I don't think there's necessarily a libertarian answer to that. I think that goes beyond libertarianism, but I don't think that that means libertarianism is useless or that libertarianism misses the mark. I don't think libertarianism answers every question of every question of the human experience. And I think both libertarians and people who are leaving it behind need to reconsider that.
Yeah.
If I could ask you, Reed, if you don't mind, Tommy, what is it that you think libertarianism is useful for?
I think it is useful for living in a peaceful society. And that's about it. I think private property and individualism leads to better outcomes. So if you have people who believe in those things, if they believe that they own themselves, they own their property, that they don't have a right to anyone else's property, I think that that is going to encourage better behavior overall. It's going to probably encourage more responsibility. It's going to discourage violence. So I think that it'll give you that extreme baseline, but I don't think it brings you happiness and fulfillment. I think those are beyond the philosophy of libertarianism.
I think I could see, because I probably would have called myself an atheist for most of my life, or at the very least, whatever word means, I don't really care. I don't know if that's agnostic or whatever, but it was mostly like, I don't really care about this. I'm living my life. I don't care if there's a God or not. It doesn't matter to me. I can understand, I think, why it would provide some sort of roadmap for someone in that position, because I think that's probably why I latched onto it for as long as I did. Although I didn't really explore it too much. It just seemed like, okay, well, this is a good car, I guess. Mm-hmm. Although I guess you could, drive a truck or walk or fly a plane to the same destination. But either way, I don't know, for people who are thinking in a more metaphysical way or religious way or spiritual way, that there's something out there that's more than us, or something that's guiding us, whether it's nature or Brahman or Nirvana or Yahweh or God or whatever, that it's even like remotely necessary. So I guess not to hijack your show, Tommy, I realize I'm going to do that. That's awful. But do you think that it's sort of like a guide for atheists only, or is there a reason for somebody who's following something like the Most High or, the Christian God, for example? What use would they have for it? Because what I said a long time ago, libertarianism to me just seems like Christianity minus Christ. And so it becomes awfully redundant if you're somebody who's religious. So I'd be curious your thoughts on that, if you don't mind me asking.
Well, sure. I have Christian relatives who believe in vaccine mandates. Christians, did the Crusades. Christians, a lot of Christians were behind the Holocaust. You have Christians or Muslims or Jews who are behind all sorts of evils throughout history. So I actually reject the notion that religion is necessarily a deterrent from violence or a deterrent from aggression. You have some Christians like Ron Paul, who are also libertarians, who do, I would say, find the goodness in the philosophy of Christianity, and they also apply it to libertarianism. I think libertarianism is more explicit in its rules. I can understand where imperialists get their ideas from the Bible. And to all those people out there who think I haven't read the Bible because I've seen you all over Twitter when I was on there, Reed just watched a couple Christopher Hitchens videos. I was brought up in the most Christian household you can imagine. I've read the whole Bible. I was into apologetics when I was in high school. I'm not a scholar. I'm not going to claim to know more than anybody or anything like that, but I do know the Bible very well. I understand the philosophy behind it and everything. And I can see where people would become neocons or where they become authoritarians from reading the Bible. I can also see how they become anarchists or minarchists, or how they wouldn't care about the government at all. I can see how you would arrive at all those conclusions. I think it's impossible to become a neocon if you actually look at the non-aggression principle. And it's just so obviously laid out. It's as if, I always thought the 10 commandments were kind of weak. Like you could have solidified the first 3 into one, really. And then, you could have had no slavery as one of the commandments. But with the non-aggression principle, I think it's laid out very plainly and very straightforward. And if you are a neocon, or if you are an authoritarian, someone who believes in vaccine mandates or imprisoning people for what they decide to put in their body, I think you haven't read the non-aggression principle, or you're purposefully misinterpreting it. Whereas with the Bible or the Quran or the Torah or, whatever religion you want to choose, it's much easier to explain how you arrived at a certain destination. I don't think you can do that with libertarianism and be honest with yourself.
Can I see that's interesting, because maybe that was like the reason why it happened. I don't know. Very interesting.
Well, I just wanted to ask Reed quickly, because I'm one of the things I'm wrestling with is my spirituality, and I was raised Southern Baptist, so I'm going back through the Bible again. Okay. When you say you can reduce the first 3 of the 10 commandments to one commandment, the guy I'm listening to right now says you can reduce all 10 commandments to one commandment, or 2 commandments, he says. And but the one that sticks out to me is what kind of like the non-aggression principle kind of covers. And so I'm wondering if there isn't some sort of a Christian theme to this, or if you've thought about it this way. So if you look at the non-aggression principle, it's kind of like the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And in the New Testament, it's said by Christ that you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And so if you're upholding loving everybody that comes across you in life as yourself, then aren't you upholding the non-aggression principle? And in that kind of a Christian theme?
Yeah. I don't think that they're incompatible at all. Like I said, Ron Paul is a great example of a great Christian who also believes in the non-aggression principle. I think you can mix it with tons of different philosophies. All I'm saying is, the Bible has so many verses, and so many people will say, oh, this verse was written in this context and it really meant this. And, that means a different thing at this time.
Gotcha.
You can't do that with the non-aggression principle. Like it's pretty obvious.
I got you. I just wanted to ask that because I was like, that's one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is one of the things I told my wife, and my wife's an atheist, I'm agnostic. And one of the things I was talking to her about, I was like, you love my grandpa so much before he died. And she was like, yeah, he was like the best man I ever met. And I was like, the one thing I know about my grandpa is that every day he lived, he tried to be Christ. Mm-hmm. And if you had a community of people that attempted to live that way, it would be a better world than what we have today.
Absolutely.
And so to me, and I talked to Adam about this last time I had Adam on. So I was like, I don't even know if it matters so much that I believe as much as I just live out the ideal. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, because the one thing there are a couple of things in Christianity I can't wrap my mind around. And so and not to go down that rabbit hole and get stuck there because we could. But sure. The one thing I look at is, even if I don't believe that there was a resurrection, it would be better to live my life as if there was a resurrection. And as if that was the archetype that I'm trying to fulfill in my life. You know what I'm saying? And if every person took on that responsibility within their own lives, maybe it's a better world that we're living in.
Absolutely. I mean, I want to address a couple things. One thing, if more Christians were like Christ, I think that Christianity would be much more attractive.
Agreed.
I don't know too many Christians in other countries, but American Christians, most of them are not very similar to Christ. We could go into a whole.
Well, they're not. Yeah, ways. I think beyond being like Christ, because I don't even know if a person could be that good.
Well, even if they try,
but they're not striving to be that.
Right.
They're not trying.
But
they don't even care, and that's a big turnoff.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. But the other thing I wanted to say is, I do talk about religion more than a lot of people would like me to. And whenever I have, I'm never criticizing people for being generous or loving their enemies, praying for those who persecute them, any of those types of things. It's usually surrounding political dominance. And, I've linked fundamentalist Christianity to Zionism, and the irony of that, like how a lot of fundamentalist Christians, they despise Islamism as like the worst scourge of the planet, but they don't realize that they're actually perpetuating it by supporting Israel and continuing the occupation of Palestine and furthering Israeli desires in our foreign policy and creating more and more Islamic extremists. So it's just kind of ironic. So that's one area I talk about a lot. But the other thing is, I didn't, just like with libertarianism, I didn't decide one day, oh, you know what? I want to be an atheist. That sounds really cool and edgy. I was just led there through honest discovery that this is where I ended up. Same with libertarianism. And I think that's the problem with humans now, is instead of honestly arriving at a conclusion, they choose a conclusion and they say, oh, I want to be a Republican, a Democrat, a Christian, an atheist, a Muslim, whatever. And I am going to sift through all of my life experiences to line up with this destination I already have in mind. And I think maybe it's always been that way, but it's really bad now. And that's why you can't have conversations with people, because they will instantly write off anything that defies their worldview that they've already pre-selected and that they're going to make sure they arrive at.
Yeah. Well, and just to be clear, like, I've heard some of your Christian conversations about Christianity and about being atheist. And I think if I've gotten it correct by listening to what you have to say, your biggest argument is that so many people are hypocrites. If I'm not mistaken, that's really your biggest thing. Which, if you read the Bible, that was Christ's biggest problem with the Pharisees. So it's not that you're not in. This is a revolving door, it seems. And I'm not calling.
Yeah,
I'm not calling you Read Christ for anybody listening. Yeah. Please don't think that's where I'm going.
Yeah. You're the one who looks the most out of us anyway. I do have my disagreements with the Bible and with some of Jesus's teachings, but most of the criticisms I'd have of religion, it wouldn't even touch the Bible or Christ. It doesn't even have to.
Right.
Even though I would have some disagreements there, it's mostly Christians and Christian culture, Christianity, and and you're right. It mostly comes down to hypocrisy. And also, like, not reading your own fucking book, knowing what's in it, and then professing to believe all of it. That's another big issue. But there's a whole bunch of stuff there.
Yeah. Adam?
Yeah, I mean, that was what I started looking back at the Bible with my friend Chris Manis on the show. That was one of the things that I really wanted to explore, right? Because, like, I grew up Roman Catholic. I pretty much got rid of that real quick out of my head. And then I'd been surrounded by a lot of Protestants pretty much my whole life. And all of that just seemed really hokey to me, like, and it still does. And so I really wanted to get into, with him, like, exegetically, what is the Bible when we talk, like, what is it? What is it designed to do? And it seemed to me, if I'm trying to be as rational about this as possible, a collection of myths, and by that I mean stories, right? Not lies, but a collection of myths designed to guide a particular group of people through life in a way that would lead them to be able to perpetuate and grow or sustain their culture, right, without being manipulated or by other people or destroyed by other people. And a lot of it was really put together, by Jews in exile in Babylonia, mid 6th century, right, BC, and kind of maneuvered and changed and tweaked in to tell the particular story from start to finish the way that sort of worked for them. And so if you go back and look at the Old Testament, a lot of it is like the same story that a lot of other groups of people believed in or shared throughout all of history. It's just this one, for some reason, lasted because people made sure it did, because they were in a particular place where they had a particular group of writers and a particular motivation to put it together to have it last this long. That is, at least for me, the starting point. And the reason I got there, or allowed myself to get there, was because I looked at 2020 and went, oh, this is a religion. This COVID hysteria, the church of woke, this is all religion. It's not like I came up with that on my own. It was through a series of conversations, and a lot of other people came to the same conclusion. And I went, okay, if we're going to call it the church of woke, and it seems like they have all the sacraments, right, all the little talismans and sigils that, what we would call religion has. Well, why is that? Why does that all seem like the same cycle or the same pattern again? And what it sort of led me to posit was, it seems to me like religion or belief in something is just hardwired into the human DNA. And we just do it. We worship, or, I would call it a need for statecraft. Other people have called it a need for sovereignty, a need for parenting, a need for someone to come in and fix our problems, or you could call it division of labor if you wanted to take that route. We can't do everything to protect ourselves at all times, so we will outsource safety and security because somebody else does it better than us. And there's something very much in our, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional DNA that sort of craves that. And if that's true, if it's true, I don't know if it is, but it seems like it is. Maybe there's a way to get to a better version of it if we start looking back far enough. And, you know, I'm not saying that I would in any way look at the Bible and say, you know, I'm taking this literally, because I think if you listen to or talk to or read enough historians of the Bible, you get like a 99 point something % agreement that this is not meant to be told that way. Right. And the people who these stories were being written to at that time would never have seen it that way. It's just because we live in this particular sort of rational age that we look at everything literally, but this is not historically the way it was. Right. So somebody living in, I don't know, 1000 BC or whatever, they would have seen a flood story for what it was. They would have seen it as teaching them a lesson about the world or working them through spiritual, mental, emotional growth. They wouldn't have thought it was an actual flood. That would not have been interpreted that way. That is a very modern and rudimentary understanding of something that they wouldn't have comprehended that way. And so it's funny you mentioned the 10 Commandments. I remember having a conversation with Chris on the show, and I said, you know, I'm reading through everything in Genesis and Exodus up to this point, and it seems like this particular God, Yahweh, whatever you want to call him, Elohim, it seems like he's going out of his way to tell these people what to do. It's like, you know what you should do? You should live this way and that way and talk to these people this way. And maybe it's better to do this instead of that. And then one day he was like, okay, you fucking retards, let's just start here. Why don't you just not kill each other? Can you comprehend that? Does that seem okay? And that's how I always looked at the 10 Commandments. It was like some, you know, all powerful God was trying to talk to these people like humans and realize that they're bloodthirsty animals who want to do nothing other than destroy each other. And he was like, okay, sit down, just don't kill each other. Can we all agree on that? And so it was funny when you were talking about the 10 Commandments, because it made me think of that. But
well, what's funny is just to really quickly interject here, the way you describe the 10 Commandments is the way I would describe the non-aggression principle. I mean, because it's exactly what you just said. You're trying to tell these people how to live, where it's like, okay, fuck, you can't even get that right. Just how about don't steal from each other and don't kill each other, which are both in the 10 Commandments. You know, and I mean, that's basically what it is. It's so if you were trying to get a full life experience out of just that extreme baseline, that's why I don't think you'd find it there. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting, the parallel there.
Sure. Well, the one thing I would say about the nap, and I do differentiate the non-aggression principle from the idea of self-ownership, at least in my head. But I would say with the nap, what it's saying really isn't the golden rule, which is do unto others. It's really what it's saying is the opposite. Well, not really the opposite, but like the inverse.
Right. It's an eye for an eye.
It's instead of, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's don't do unto others as you would have them not do unto you. Right. It's a strange inversion of the idea, which is very like explicit or I can't think of the word. It's very much like a product of a different way of thinking in this culture than that culture.
Yeah, it's mutual assured destruction. Like don't almost. I mean, and it's also the it's not a philosophy of forgiveness. The non-aggression principle at its baseline, at least, it's don't aggress unless aggressed upon. That's an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. That's Old Testament stuff. That's not Christ-like. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, so I'll unmute again, and because I was just enjoying this. Sometimes I just kind of spectate when I have multiple people on.
Well, you got 3 hosts doing a show together.
I know. So it's just like every once in a while I can just take a break and just mute the microphones and be like, all right, like, let's see what's going on here. Let's kind of move into the post-libertarian, because I think we've covered the libertarian, kind of covered the spiritual angle of how the libertarianism fits into the way that traditional societies were built what is going on with this? And I know Pete had it in one of his show titles. He called it Post-Libertarianism. I think Buck mentioned it as Post-Libertarianism as one time, but I don't think that's really what's going on here. What I think is happening, it's Hoppianism. That's kind of what I'm gathering. It's not leaving libertarianism. It's leaving Rothbard for Hoppe. And Hoppe was a student of Rothbard. I have a friend of mine who's been on my show several times before, Michael Harris, who was one of Rothbard's students at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And he was also, but Hoppe at the time was his, I don't know what you call it, co-professor or whatever. He was going for his doctorate. He was helping out, and he was doing his thing, and he was teaching a lot of the courses in place of Rothbard. And so I think what is happening with like Pete and some of these guys is they have left Rothbard for Hoppe, and a lot of people are stuck on Rothbard and unwilling to explore Hoppe. And I'll be honest, other than What Must Be Done, I don't know much about Hoppe's work. I listened to one of his audiobooks a few days ago. So let's dive in a little bit to this whole idea of post-libertarianism. Reed, what are your some of your qualms or concerns or thoughts about what is being discussed right now?
Well, so I've listened to Matt Erickson and Cyprian a little bit, and then I've listened to Pete a lot. I've had him on the show a couple times, and then I just had Andrew from Popular Liberty on, and then I've listened to one of Buck Johnson. Buck's, what is his last name? Johnson? I keep forgetting.
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Buck Johnson. Okay, Buck Johnson's.
That's the most American name of any American ever made.
Yeah, it is. So that's where my knowledge on it is coming from. And then when I had Twitter, I saw it. The spats going back and forth all the time. So what I have collected is that it's the idea that thin libertarianism is not enough, and we need to fully embrace praxis. So we need culture, religion, and political action to fill the void that libertarianism leaves behind, and that the best bet for liberty is actually gaining support through right-wing populism at a local level. Is that kind of accurate, Adam, would you say?
Oh, fuck. I don't know. I think that's certainly been some people's take, I guess. I'm not a politics guy personally, because I don't feel like I need to be. I think Andrew would probably tell you that that's a pretty good summation. I think probably if there's anything that would corral people that might be called post-libertarian into a collective, like if there's any way to generalize it, it would be having come from calling themselves a libertarian and beginning to question if there are other ways of getting to a libertarian endpoint. And that's just me saying that. I don't know if other people would agree with it. Like I said, I don't consider myself that. If anything, I consider myself more of an anarch than anything with an ist at the end of it.
We'll get to that. Calm down.
Like I don't know exactly. and certainly I think politics can be, in this day and age, can be very dangerous because it's the kind of thing that can get people killed or at very least hurt if they're not prepared for it. I try to talk people out of going into politics. Certainly Andrew doesn't, right. and I respect that avenue. I think he's more prepared for it than a lot of people that I've talked to. But personally, it's just not my thing. So I don't know. And I really hesitate to speak for other people, but I think that's the best summation I could think of. People who had called themselves libertarian in the past, who are not just questioning libertarianism, but trying to figure out how to actuate what it is that libertarianism has somehow failed to actuate.
Yeah. I think the other
can I just interject just for 1 second? Because I think part of what's happening is libertarians have seen the ineffectual nature of libertarian politics. They've seen that agorists are out there acting. And so they're trying to figure out, like, how do you take that agorist mindset, posit it onto the libertarian ideals, and utilize that in the most effective way? And what they've determined is that since most people are either Republican or Democrat, that they can utilize libertarian ideals within a specific party that is recognizable to the normies and utilize that party for their own gains. And it's one of the things I've talked about, not in grave detail, and I'm trying to get Tho Bishop on the show to have this conversation with, but my dad and I were talking politics a while back, and he was like, Andrew Wilkow thinks that the future of the Republican Party is libertarianism. So, and at the time, I mean, this was 2 years ago, so I was kind of like, whatever, I don't give a fuck. But it never went away from my mind. So I think what they're trying to do is kind of what the progressives did with the Democratic Party, is hijack the party for their own gains. And so they're looking, if we can utilize this locally, then eventually on a federal level, we're going to have the reins of power as libertarians and be able to take over the state and leave you alone, kind of deal. I think that's kind of the idea. That's what I've gathered.
Yeah. So, I mean, the other thing that I've gotten from a lot of them is that they hate the idea of meeting evil with peace. So the idea is you need to destroy your enemy. It's not about making peace with your enemy. You need to remove them, and that's the solution to the problem. So I guess what I'll say is what I agree with them on first is the idea of localism. I think that's absolutely correct. I think trying to get a different person elected president, or even trying to overhaul Congress at this point, is a joke. I think the largest level that you should really be focusing on is who your governor is. I mean, I care about that way more right now than who the president is. I was on Tower Gang a couple nights ago, and Clint and I were going back and forth about whether Kamala Harris or Ron DeSantis would be a better president. And I said, I really don't care who's president. I care who my governor is, and I care who's in my state legislature, who my mayor is, especially in these times, that just matters way more. So I'm 100% with them on that. And then, as we've discussed, I think that you need something more than just non-aggression to live an interesting, fulfilling life, and that just selling non-aggression as the end all be all is, kind of falls short, that's not the answer. So those are the things I really agree with them on. Where I would disagree is a lot of them are very sectarian. And I guess I'll just throw out names here, but like Cyprian and Matt Erickson, and sometimes Pete, even though I love Pete, we're good friends. Even sometimes Andrew, who I just had on the show, and I'm friendly with him too. I think they're very specific about what those things have to be that you're looking to fill the void that libertarianism doesn't fill. And I had Pete on to talk about this, and I said, look, I'm someone who is not a degenerate. I have a full-time job. I have a successful podcast. I've traveled to all 50 states. I'm a skier. I'm a scuba diver. I do all this stuff, but, I'm not a religious person. And I want other non-religious people to have some sort of inspiration to live for. And I want them to also desire non-aggression and libertarian principles. I don't want every atheist out there to become a degenerate communist. I mean, that does not seem like a net gain to me. So I'm all for, if you are a Christian, like I've had Jacob Winograd on my show. He's the biblical anarchy guy on Twitter, and he's got a YouTube channel. And he lays out a great case for Christians to be anarchists. I think that's absolutely great. What I hate is when you start delegitimizing other people's paths to liberty. And I mean, I would disagree with Jacob on a whole litany of things, but I'm not going to discourage him from trying to encourage his fellow Christians to become libertarian or become anarchists or whatever. And I see a disdain from a lot of people in the post-libertarian crowd toward people who don't want to embrace religion fully or embrace traditional conservative values even. And I think that's a mistake because, I think that we actually need a big tent in these times. We need to get everybody on board with being against vaccine mandates and being against, mask mandates or, giving the cops more power over your lives or whatever it is. Like, I think we need to try to work across lines, even if you can't fully ally with someone in a cause. If there's a specific issue you can agree with them on, I'm all about throwing everything else aside, saying, hey, you and I, we both agree on this. Let's get this one thing done. And they don't seem to be about that. They seem to be very, very definitive in who the enemy is, very willing to draw lines that you shall not cross, and, dehumanizing kind of large swaths of people. I mean, the left, what does that even mean anymore? The left is evil. Is that my mom who voted for Biden? Is she the left? They admit they admit in one point that, a lot of people aren't philosophical anymore and that we need philosophy again. But then at the same time, they're dismissing this whole swath of people who really don't have a philosophy. I mean, most leftists or people who voted for Bernie or people who voted for Biden, they have zero philosophy. They haven't thought it out at all. And a lot of them are also not authoritarian people who want to force you to get a vaccine. A lot of them just voted for Biden or Bernie because they wanted something else than Trump. So I think the sectarianism in general is just the wrong way to go. I think being extremely specific about what needs to fill the void beyond libertarianism is not a good way to go. And I think also utilizing the Republican Party kind of depends on where you live. I mean, if you live in Florida, that's probably not a bad choice. But in Utah in 2016, Hillary Clinton came in third place. It was Donald Trump, or I think Donald Trump was first, and then the independent candidate was second, and then Hillary Clinton was third. And the Republican Party in Utah is horrible. I mean, I realize if you're living in New York or like Adam in Connecticut, like the Republican Party is probably not the same Republican Party that it was in the 1970s, but in Utah it is. I mean, they're trying to ban pornography right now. We had 3 days of prayer because we're in a drought. The governor asked for 3 days of prayer. So, I mean, and I don't care about that. That's fine. But I'm just using that as an example to show where we are here in Utah. Things are very socially conservative, very authoritarian in the Republican Party. So maybe in Utah, the Libertarian Party actually is a good idea because the independent candidate, I believe, got 20% of the vote in 2016. And you've got a lot of young people who are sick of the church running the state in Utah, but they're also not socialist degenerates because they were raised in pretty conservative families. So you could have an extra option for them. So I think, I made the comment, and I think we're going to talk about this eventually, but I made the comment that the post-libertarians are the loser brigade of the right. And I ended up making a post later on clarifying that I shouldn't have said that because I don't know every person. And like Adam said, not everyone considers themselves post-libertarian, or, it's a moniker that's just been applied to them through no choice of their own, maybe. So I shouldn't have said that just because I don't know everybody who claims or doesn't claim that title. But in general, the sentiment was, if you're just going to be very dismissive of anyone who disagrees with your exact goals that you have, which is exactly what the loser brigade does. And even outside of the loser brigade, a lot of like autistic libertarians who just think LP, LP, LP. They don't care, if the Republican who is in their state legislature is pushing to legalize cannabis. They just don't care because he's not a libertarian. They care more about the party's success than liberty. I think those people are idiots, but I think a lot of the post-libertarians kind of have the same attitude toward libertarians in general. And so I just think it's a really simplistic way to look at every scenario. And I also don't think it's that new. Like, I feel like they're acting like they've just come across this crazy idea where I think it's just basically being a Republican, which is fine, but I just don't think it's this crazy new notion. I don't think libertarianism is either. I don't think that it's this, some people who just do nothing but talk about the non-aggression principle like it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and they just found it yesterday. That can get obnoxious, but I kind of feel the same way with Praxian ideology. It's like, yeah, the idea that culture and religion and all these things are going to hold society together, that's not a new idea at all. I mean, if you think that, that's fine, but just, stop acting like people who don't agree with you are just idiots and that they're not listening to the brand new ideology that just came on the block. So I think that's a pretty fair way to pull it out.
Yeah, no, I don't think you said anything wrong there. And I think that maybe that's a criticism that a lot of people should take to heart. And what I'm hearing, if I were to break it down, is that there are a lot of libertarians living in Ancapistan in their heads, but there are a lot of people that are living in Twitterstan on their phones, and they're focused too much on the overly vocal crowd and not enough on the normies, and not enough on how everyday people are living their lives. And so they find that the people that are making the much noise, that's where they're finding all the threat from. And maybe that's not where the threat is coming from.
Yeah, I mean, are you talking about like when I'm saying the left, when they're like categorizing the entire left?
Yeah. What they're talking about, this vocal minority that you run into on Twitter. They're not talking they're not talking about average Joe Blow that just watched MSNBC or CNN and was told Trump was Hitler and voted against Trump. It's such a small minority, and this is where I get so frustrated. Is this world that we're encompassing is such a minority. It's such a small amount of people that if your average person, dude that listens to morning radio and maybe some Poison on the weekends ran into this conversation, they would have no fucking clue what the hell we're even talking about. It would do them no good. It would matter not to them whatsoever. They would hear 15 minutes and they'd be like, whatever, man, I don't even know what the hell you people are talking about, and they'd move on. But some people, they probably wouldn't make it. They probably wouldn't make it 15 seconds. But but there's so many people that make it their life's work, and it's like, okay, the fact of the matter is, you're talking about such a small minority of people that does this even matter, and to what extent does it matter? And that's what we have to try to figure out. That's what we have to confront the evils that we find in the world. Nobody's saying we don't have to confront those. Nobody's saying we don't have to fight those. We have to figure out how to balance that fight with how we communicate with the rest of the world. And I know there are situations in which private or public schools and elementary schools have had like this, what was it? The transgender story hour or whatever it's called. okay, that's a problem. We need to confront that. Our children, young children, do not need to be like confronted with that there's no reason. I remember the first time my son ever told me, he was 15 years old, he told me he was pansexual. I was like, you don't know what sexual you are, you're 15, shut up, but like, so there is that confrontation that has to be made, but we have to differentiate between the general public and those that are pushing that agenda.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, with the post-libertarians and the left, it's a lot like some of these lowberts and the Trump supporters. I mean, because they act like every single person who voted for Trump is a racist, homophobic, misogynist, fascist. And that's just absolutely ridiculous. Like my brother voted for Joe Biden, and my brother he's very similar to us. If he were in this conversation, he'd be jiving with us. And he just voted for Biden because he was just sick of Trump. Then I tried to convince him otherwise, but he did it. And then, my grandmother voted for Trump, and she voted for Trump because she's worried about the future. And she thought Joe Biden was going to be worse for the country. There was no ideological battle there. It wasn't anything about property rights. There was nothing about the non-aggression principle or collectivism or eating the rich. Like, none of that went into these decisions from my brother or my grandmother. They were just visceral reactions to how, Trump was as president. And they both chose different paths. And to act like they actually have a philosophy that led them there is absolutely ridiculous. Of course they didn't. they just voted like most people do. And I know that, three of us, even though Adam's not into politics, we would say that local politics matter more, but most people don't even know who their governor is or who their state representatives or congressional representatives or senators or any of that are. So their vote for president is actually their most intrinsic philosophical vote that they're going to make, because they're probably going to choose who they vote for president and then just mark down the line Democrat or Republican based on whoever they voted for.
Right.
So I just think that it's important to remember that.
I live in a very, very small town. I still have no idea who is the mayor around here. I have Googled and searched and tried to figure it out. I can't find it anywhere on Google. I cannot figure it out. I have no idea what's going on politically around this place. All I know is they want to shut down game rooms and they want the police to arrest fucking meth heads. That's all I know about the politics around this place. So it's not even, sometimes it's not even easy to find. Sometimes that information is not even readily available, which is interesting, because I was trying to figure it out for the next election. I was like, well, what's going on here with politics? Who's the mayor? Who's in charge of the city council? Blah, blah. I can't find out anything. It doesn't matter how much I Google, how much I fucking search. I can't figure it out. I can't figure out the politics around this place. All I know is the way they raise money is they have a fair and a crawfish boil every year. That's all I know. That's how they raise money to pay for roads and shit like that around here. That's all I know about the politics around this place.
I mean, isn't that a good thing?
Yeah, it really is. It's relieving in a lot of ways.
I just got to make one really quick correction on my part. Hillary Clinton actually did come in second place, but it was very close. It was Donald Trump with 500,000 votes. Hillary Clinton had 310,000 votes. And then Evan McMullen had 243,000 votes. I just wanted to point that out for the listeners.
Okay. That's fine. That works. All right, Adam. I know you're not a post-libertarian, but based upon Reed's criticism of what he said, and these people pretty intimately, probably more so than me. I know you're involved in a group chat with them, and you're talking to these guys pretty regularly. What, based upon the way Reed is reading what is being said, what are you gathering? Are they not communicating properly, or is he getting the information that they want him to get?
Well, I mean,
depends on who they are, right?
no. So what I probably shouldn't do is make a similar mistake that I've made in the past, which is attempt to defend an entire group of people without knowing the nuances of what every single one of them want to say. And I would say maybe some of that is fair and some of it isn't, depending on which human being in the particular group you're referencing. I would rather not speak for other people, although I do feel like I'm in an interesting position where I sort of feel like I have to right now. But I think everybody would appreciate having the opportunity to respond with their own voice to that. I can tell you what I think of it, which is politics, right? So I made just some notes while you were talking because it was a lot of stuff, and I wanted to try to hit on all the points that Reed was talking about there. When it comes to politics, it's not that I don't particularly like to get involved in politics because it's time consuming and generally irrelevant, right? Unless you want to make it your like full-time job, which I don't, because I make a lot of money in my full-time job and I don't feel like losing that to go dick around in local politics. I do sit on the SCC for the LP here in Connecticut. So it's not like I'm not in the loop what goes on. And the town that I live in, I do know who is involved in what's going on here because my town and surrounding towns are almost 100% insulated from any COVID related bullshit. There's no masks here. There's no vaccine shit here. I've been insulated from that pretty much from jump. So I do know how that works. And if I had to get involved in it, I most certainly would. What I do try to make a point of bringing up to people is don't get into politics or involved in politics or even pretend to want to be involved in politics if you are not prepared for what that means. And I think it's not for me so much a critique of the Mises Caucus or the Libertarian Party en masse. It is the age, maturity, or sophistication level of many people involved where I feel they are quite literally outmatched, with the type of fight that they're trying to take on. And that is not to say that they're not into it or believe in what they're doing. It is more of like a safety issue, saying that, okay, I know you believe in this and I know you're dedicated to this, but it is not necessarily a bad thing to admit that you're just not ready for it. Like, it's not in your nature to do this. It's not in, and it shouldn't be. Like, it's not a bad thing to not be prepared to go into politics, because I don't know how you are a principled libertarian and get involved in politics. I don't know how that works. And if you want to win, I mean, you could maybe get lucky and win, or maybe you could, quote unquote, spread the message. I suppose we can get into what that means. But generally, I feel like they're going to be very let down when they see how the political world functions, and they're not ready for it. And I know that because I'm older than them and I've been around. I just do. There's a few people in there who, if they had the right people surrounding them or really good leadership, kind of get it, but most don't. Most are, we use LARPing. That's not really a good term, because they're not pretending. They're really into it, right? They really believe they're doing something good and productive and genuine for society. I don't know how you do that and go into politics. And so my advice to them is don't do any of that at all, because you're outmatched and you're going to lose, and you're probably going to hurt people, if not yourself. Your time and energy would be better spent doing something like you, Tommy, or you, Reed, or I do, which is working to make yourself immune to tyranny. And then when you're in a position where you are actually free, or you actually achieve some sort of individual liberty or economic freedom, then you can actually spread that message. Because for people who believe in property rights and ownership, it's really hard to share something with somebody if you don't actually possess it. So I can't share your lamp with somebody because it isn't mine. And I certainly can't share the message of liberty with somebody if I don't have any liberty. So I think their time and energy would be better spent improving their own socioeconomic position, or at least to the extent that they feel comfortable with the results of it. Right? For many people, they might need to be very wealthy in order to do what they want to do. And some people probably could be homeless and do what they want to do. And both of those people would be following a wealth, power, and influence path, I think. It's really difficult for me to see.
Just quick point to what you're saying there. One of the hardest lessons I ever had to learn in my life was that you cannot help somebody until you help yourself.
Yeah, right. And I think everybody here agrees with that. I just had to learn it the hard way. Well, I think everybody does, right? It's the general, right? The general cycle. You can teach the younger people the thing, right? So they could know, like, I don't want to speak for you guys, but I didn't have like a mentor growing up. You know, I had like kids I hung out with in the neighborhood, and I had a really good family, but not like the most street smart family in the world, like very like book smart family, very loving family, I was raised well, but certainly the street smarts came on my own. And even when I got into the military or when I got into the restaurant industry, I didn't have anyone telling me what to do or how to do anything or guiding me along. It was all fuck up, learn, figure it out, fuck up, make a mistake, learn, figure it out, grow, try to figure, and make like a success out of that. So there's a natural inclination for people who have done that to want to save the younger generation or those coming up behind us a lot of time, effort, and energy, and say, well, you know what, if you just maybe do this, this, and this, you can save yourself like 10 years. And then when you get to 39, almost 40 years old, you'll actually be so far ahead of where I'm at. Like, think about all the shit you could accomplish. But again, that natural cycle of the rebel kid is to just be like, fuck that. I'm not listening to you. I'm going to go through it. So that just might be inevitable. The problem is when you start getting into politics in 2021 or, moving forward, 2022, next couple of years, it's getting really fucking dangerous out there. Like, it's not the 80s where you can just, dick around in there without any consequences. So I get really nervous for a lot of these people that they're being led down a path that's going to be very dangerous for them. And I mean that literally. I'm not trying to create a metaphor. I think it's going to be very literally dangerous for them. Mm-hmm. And I would like to see them avoid that if possible. So that's when I talk about politics, that's what I'm talking about. I don't know if the other people that you're referencing would agree with that or not. My guess is some of them would, some of them wouldn't. I don't want to speak to that. The other thing I wanted to talk about was sort of the difference between individual liberty and economic freedom and libertarianism. Because one of the traits that I see, and I don't see it in either of you, to be perfectly honest, this idea that being a libertarian becomes something of an identity. And I don't know if you remember The Dark Knight when the Joker says something to Batman, like, if I wouldn't even know what to do with the car if I caught it, like I'm just chasing the car perpetually. And Junger talks about this in Humisville too, the concept of the anarch, that the anarchist or anybody with the ist is constantly in a perpetual cycle with the thing they're fighting against, and that those two things need each other, right? The rebel and the cause constantly circle in a pattern and need each other to survive. Yeah. And so I wonder sometimes when I'm maneuvering in what we would call the liberty space, if many libertarians or liberty leading people actually want what they say they want, if they actually want to actuate a goal of individual liberty and economic freedom, because their actions and their words don't match that goal. It seems that it's easier to rail against the problem, hoping to God or whomever that it's never solved, because then they never actually have to, like you talked about, Reed, ever really be responsible for their own lives. Because God forbid that they actually got what they wanted, I don't think they would know what to do with it. So that's the couple of points I wanted to make sure I touched on, just based on what you were saying before.
Yeah. And
Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to say,
go ahead, Reed. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say that last part I really agree with. I feel like those are not mutually exclusive. I think you can be politically involved and help yourself before you help others, and try to increase your wealth, power, and influence. I mean, you know, I work 60 hours a week, and I've always been financially well off. I bought my parents' septic system for them with cash when I think it was 19 or 20. I forgot how old I was, somewhere around there. And I just bought it for them, and then they paid me back over time. I just bought my dad a new truck with cash last year. I bailed my sister out before. My friend had chest surgery, and he had a well go dry at the same time. So I bailed him out with cash, and like all these, I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm just pointing out that you're right. Like the best way to take reliance off the state is to be independent yourself, and also make it so that you can help other people who are close to you be independent. And so many libertarians miss that. But I think they can do both. I think you can be politically involved and also do those things. And I do think that being independent yourself is more important than being politically involved. I mean, pretty much everybody who's been successful politically has been an impressive person. You know, Pete points that out a lot, that if you want Archie Flowers to be some sort of political leader, then maybe you need to look somewhere else. You need someone who's actually established, who has a good reputation, who's probably kind of wealthy, who has skills, something like that. So I just wanted to say I really agree with that point that you made. I think that's right on.
I would even just go. Sorry, Tom, just a second further and say, yes to what you said. I think you should work on the wealth, power, and influence first. You can do both, politics and better yourself, but I don't think you can do the politics without the rest of it. I think that is unfortunately the path I see many people going down. And for me, that becomes a very dangerous path, because if you don't have actually anything of value to offer, you start, what you'll do when you enter the political realm is you'll start becoming a zealot about it. And then that ends up getting people hurt. So I agree with all of your agreeing. I just wanted to point out that part, that's the part that makes me the most nervous when I see people who have done nothing to further their own independence, like you have, and they're trying to then be involved in politics and push a message. Like that, to me, is the absolute wrong way to go about it. And I think, you know, for the very sake of that individual's life, they need to be talked out of that quite adamantly.
Yeah, I don't think I disagree. I think there are a lot of impressive people in the Mises Caucus and that movement of the libertarian world. I think most of the unimpressive people are the ones who are we were talking before the show about the backlash of the Mises takeover. A lot of those people are very unimpressive. You just look at their profile pictures on Twitter and you know that they haven't accomplished anything in life. The only dynasty they have is the Libertarian Party. So they're going to fight tooth and nail to keep someone else who can pretty much just waltz in there and take over because there's no competition. They're going to do everything they can to keep that from happening. So I think most of the types of people you're talking about are the ones who are being replaced, but I still agree with your overall sentiment.
Yeah, right on.
The only thing I wanted to add was what Adam was saying is something that I've concerned myself with, and I've texted people about, and it's like, okay, Dave Smith is talking about running for president, right? So what does this mean? Like, how is he going to get hurt? Like, how are they going to attack him if he even approaches the Ron Paul revolution, which is what the Mises Caucus claims they want. They want a second Ron Paul revolution. If he even approaches that kind of success, what does this mean for him? I mean, look what happened to JFK. Like what kind of jeopardy is Dave Smith putting himself into?
None.
By being involved in a movement that has the potential of creating that kind of outcry.
None.
You don't think so? Even with them like going on television, like demonizing libertarians, and I mean, they're just out there saying that libertarians are the enemy, and that concerns me.
I mean, not really. I mean, the people that, who was that? Brennan, who said that libertarians are domestic terrorists?
Yeah,
he doesn't
John
even
Brennan.
know what that means. Yeah, he doesn't even know what that means. He's talking about, he sees the yellow flag with the fucking snake, and he associates it with something that some analyst somewhere that this dude, I used to work with fucking CIA, the fucking spooks when I was in the military. These people are so detached from reality. They're living in a cubicle in Langley. They don't understand how the world, like no one really, like what we're talking about. John Brennan has no idea that this exists. Now, what I wanted to, I didn't mean to laugh when you were comparing Ron Paul to JFK, but it is like,
oh no, what I was saying is if they were willing to go through that action with JFK, today they're demonizing so many people. They're trying to paint. They want someone to be the face of domestic terrorism. They want that more than anything. And if they can get one person as that face, they are not going to hold back to do something.
Yeah, well, it's not going to be Dave Smith. I mean, I'm not saying that he wouldn't, succumb to
it's going to be
the pressure to run for president. Although, that's a lot more likely because he would.
You heard it from the spook. You heard it right here from the spook. No, I'm just playing.
I mean, but I still think, and I've said this from the beginning, and I don't know Dave. I mean, I know you guys do. I don't see any upside.
I've never met Dave. I know people that know Dave, and I don't know if I'm with you. I don't know if there's an upside with him running.
Well, the only upside to Dave running for president is that more people are going to listen to his show, which makes total sense. But I don't think that's why he would do it. But now with another kid, I don't know what the benefit would be. I don't. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Yeah. My point is, you and I, Tommy, remember the Ron Paul thing maybe a little bit differently than Reed, just from an age point of view. So I was in my mid 20s or whatever. And I remember listening to Ron Paul, and I had I'm pretty sure the same response to it that both of you did, which was, wow, that's incredible. I want to know more about this. This guy is speaking my language,
I was
the only human being that I knew who had that response to that.
Right.
Every other human being I knew thought this dude was a wackadoodle. And I'm talking like every single human being. My parents thought he was nuts. All my friends thought he was nuts. And people who didn't think he was nuts had no idea who he was because they didn't watch the shit. They're like, who? What are you talking about? So when we talk about a quote unquote Ron Paul revolution, understand what that means. It means us in this space. Many of us were brought to this space in some way by Ron Paul. That is a very, very small amount of people. Very, very small. So when we're talking about making, somebody who's running on the Libertarian Party platform being someone who's got like a laser scope on their head from like deep state, I don't think the deep state has any clue what any of this even is. Like, I don't think what we're talking about is on the radar of any human being outside of any of this.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a good place to operate within, because if you're being really stealthy with it, you can actually maneuver tactically and maybe get some things done like behind the curtains. I just think people need to be really careful with this Ron Paul revolution, like saying it's really not as big as people think it is. And that's coming from somebody who was essentially brought to this space by that man. I was the only human being I knew that had any idea that happened and had that view of it. So I don't know if you had similar, experiences or not, but it might be semi-exaggerated in our space. Is all I'm saying.
I was completely apolitical at that time. I remember my dad was watching a debate, and I kind of looked over. I had just gotten out of the Army not long before that, and my dad was watching a debate, and I kind of looked over, and he's like, "Can you believe this bullshit?" And I was like, "Whatever," and I just walked away. It mattered not to me. I didn't care one way or the other at the time. How are y'all doing on time?
Yeah, I'm still good.
Yeah, I'm all right for a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What you were saying, Ruth.
I was a neocon in 2012, but I remember Ron Paul. I actually did like him, and it was for probably the wrong reasons. It wasn't about the war stuff or the NSA or any of that. It was, this guy actually wants to cut food stamps, so I'm gonna vote. I like this guy, but when it comes to the second Ron Paul revolution or whatever. I mean, I think Dave could inspire a lot of people. I think people who think he's going to win or think that he's going to get 20% or something like that, I think that's ridiculous. But I think he would generate the most excitement out of any potential contenders. And I used to think it would be Justin Amash, but that was just because of the media attention he gets. Because when he talked about running last time, instantly he had a slot on Bill Maher's show and MSNBC or whatever. But if you look at Bill Maher's show and MSNBC or anywhere that Justin Amash would end up, and you compare it to Joe Rogan or Jimmy Dore, or like any of these like big YouTube places where Dave could go, like he could probably even though like Ben Shapiro is definitely not a libertarian, he could probably end up on his show, probably end up on Steven Crowder. He'd be with, he'd probably end up on Fox News. He's been on Fox Business a lot. So I think he makes the most sense out of anyone who would do it. And I think he would generate the most excitement. And I think he would connect with the best audience, because the other thing with Amash versus Dave is Justin Amash is going to be on Bill Maher and MSNBC a lot. People who watch those shows are not looking for something different already. People who are watching Joe Rogan or Tim Pool or Jimmy Dore or Ben Shapiro, most of them have kind of rejected the mainstream approach to things. They're probably not all super anti-establishment or even libertarians or anything like that, but they've rejected the mainstream on, at some level. So I don't really see any harm in him doing it. The only harm I could see is if people start caring more about that than they do about what's going on in their own state. What I would like to see Dave do if he runs for president and it does take off is I want to see him, trying to draw attention to local issues, because I think you could do both. You could bring national awareness to localized issues state to state, especially if you're doing a state to state tour during your presidential run. That I think would be the most effective way to go about it. And, he doesn't even have to necessarily just be boosting the Libertarian Party, but just boosting these ideas in general. And then if you have a Republican who's running in your state, or even if you're in some weird super conservative state and there's a Democrat running for some reason who's going to end up initiating more liberty policies in some way, I think that, people would be more prone to pay attention to that type of thing. So I don't really see a downside to it. And I think some people are a little too excited for it, but I also think people are downing it so much for some reason. I don't really understand why. Like if people don't think it's going to be a success and they think it's a waste of time, okay, like just let it be a waste of time. Just go keep doing your own thing. It seems like a lot of people, especially, and not so much the post-libertarians, but more in the Libertarian Party who don't like Dave, who don't want him to do it. I think that they're actually afraid that it is going to be way more successful than anything they've done, because I think it would be. I think it would be more successful than what we've seen. And people don't want to see that. They want to see some establishment guy who's been around forever to, kind of break the mold. They don't want to see Dave Smith do it. So I support the idea. I think it's a good idea, but I would agree to a point with what Adam's saying, that people shouldn't be focusing on that while they're still in debt and they still have no skills and they don't have a job and they're just waiting for Dave Smith 2024 to save the day. That's incredibly naive. So as I said earlier, I think you could do both. I think it would be good to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but I see no harm in supporting Dave running in a couple of years.
So if I can ask you real quick, because I know, Reed, that you worked on Tulsi Gabbard's campaign. Was it like 2014 and maybe another one as well? That's correct, right?
In 2020, I worked on her campaign.
Okay. So you actually worked in the campaign, one of the headquarters, like saw the structure of the organization, right?
There was no structure, but I wasn't paid. I was a volunteer in New Hampshire, but man, it was such a shoestring budget campaign that, I basically did see the inner workings of it. It was pretty interesting. No,
it's cool because a lot of people haven't. And I think having that perspective, you kind of can see what goes into the underdog fight of a political campaign. It's not the well-oiled machine of like John McCain, right? Where you just have these like Yale graduates who get out and they're not volunteer. Well, they might be volunteering, but they're really volunteering so they can get like $1 million position at a law firm somewhere at the end of the campaign. Right. So, so when we're talking about someone like Justin Amash, who's just a failed senator, who's accomplished nothing and ran away when he had a chance to actually achieve something of value, whether it was on principle or because he just doesn't have the balls to actually go into politics. I'm glad that you would rather have Dave Smith, because Dave at least has a fucking set of stones. And he's highly entertaining and really fucking quick and clever when it comes to people trying to get on his shit, which I really appreciate. The two things I would think would be harmful would be obviously his own personal life, which takes a huge hit. And I don't doubt that Dave would obviously consider his family before putting himself in a position like that, although he is an entertainer, so it might actually come natural. I would be more concerned with understanding the nature of the podcasting audience as opposed to political followers. I don't necessarily know if I think I'm right about that, but it's a hunch or a gut feeling that you have to be, I think, a little bit aware of who you're galvanizing, who you're bringing into the fight, that coming from where he's come from, the entertainment podcasting background, the comedy world background, the type of person you might be galvanizing there might not be the most politically advantageous person to have on your side. And that's probably the best way I could say it without being rude, or not rude, but trying to sort of get the point across without being mean to anybody. I'm not trying to say these people are like Dave's followers are like bad people. I just think there's something that I don't think he sees in an entertainment audience turned political, that anyone who's like really seen power work would, or marketing or sales, or anybody who like maneuvers through personalities for a living to get desired outcomes would probably see a little bit more overtly. That makes me nervous. Then again, it's people are free to make bad decisions and put themselves in bad situations. And of course, it is not Dave's responsibility to tell his followers to do this, that, or the other thing. But like it kind of is, if you're aware of it. So I don't know. I mean, that's my thought on it. But really, at the end of the day, I just think the dude is like too good for this. And I would really rather see him just kill it on a show than to go into this world and have to deal with these fucking lunatics all the time. But, I don't know. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. Let me put it that way.
I don't think he wants to do it. I do believe him when he says he wants somebody else to do it. And he was hoping that Justin Amash or Thomas Massey could be the guy, but he doesn't feel like either of them represent the movement well enough or have the fire, or, he thinks they're flawed enough not to do it. I agree with you on the personal level that it would certainly, it would certainly fuck up your personal life. And I with everything that just happened with his son that was born, I don't know if that's going to affect anything, but that's obviously up to Dave. So if Dave feels up to it, things could change, but I tend to support him if he does it. And what I hate, I really hated this working on Tulsi's campaign, was the cult of personality. Like, people couldn't get beyond the person to the ideas. It was all about, especially with Tulsi, because she was hot, attractive woman. She's very hot. But she's also very nice and friendly and warm and personable to talk to. So everything about her was just great. So people couldn't get beyond the idea of the person and apply it to, hey, she wants to end the war in Afghanistan and stop arming terrorists, and she wants to end the drug war and the Patriot Act and all this other shit. Like, you couldn't get beyond that. And I do see that happening with Dave, because he also, the ladies are going to love him, and he's also a very charismatic, funny person. So I think you will have a giant cult of personality going on there, which that's probably the biggest drawback I see to it. But I don't know. I still think, given the options we have, he's the best choice, because if Ron DeSantis is the Republican nominee, I don't see what libertarian messages he's going to bring to the table, because I don't know what things are going to be like in 2024, but suppose the lockdowns are gone and the vax passport thing is blown over, whatever. Like, I don't know. But depending on what the situation is, the positions he's going to be running on for president are mostly not going to be libertarian issues at all. He's not going to bring awareness to that philosophy or that idea, where that's very much what Ron Paul did. He would bring it back to the idea of, this is dumb because you don't control other people's lives. You got to let them make their own decisions. I don't see Ron DeSantis doing that. So I don't, unless it's like Rand Paul or Thomas Massey, which there's no way in hell it will be. I don't really see a Republican presidential campaign bringing attention to those important issues, I guess.
Yeah. And probably the only way you can get those important issues across to people is if you don't have a chance of winning, because we see when people do have a chance of winning, not only how they dilute the message, but even if they have a message like Trump, who stuck to that message all the way through to election day, how quickly they turn into a fucking mutt once they get in there. And that happens it happened with fucking Thomas Jefferson, for fuck's sake. Go in there and start a war, who, I thought you were this guy, for your entire life. Now you're this. So maybe that's the easiest way to do it, is to just know you have nothing to lose or everything, and then you can actually get that message across, because you have no chance of actually securing a win in the first place.
Yeah, because I think Rand Paul actually thought he had a shot when he first entered the race, and did what he did, and it sucked. So,
Well, all right. So I want to wrap up soon, but I do want to get into one more subject, which is more in Adam's wheelhouse. We made him talk for a bunch of people that he's not being paid to represent, which is unfair because he's not Jen Psaki. But I do. I want.
Is that how you say the name? I had to think about what you just said. So I was thinking Psaki like to drink. Is that how you say your name?
Psaki. That's how I say it.
I never heard anybody say it out loud before. That's weird. Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things Adam's talked about a bit, and he's brought it up on my show before, and we've never dug into it, is the idea of the anarch, and he brought it up tonight. Now, I know this is more his perspective on how things operate, and so it's kind of what he brings to the table as far as the post-libertarian philosophy, because it's not it. If I'm not mistaken, it has 4 general themes. Am I right, Adam? Can you explain this to us a little bit more?
I'm not sure what you mean by 4 general themes. As far as like the right, like Junger's writings on the anarch.
Yeah. The way Junger attacked the idea of the anarch.
So full transparency, I had promised Pete that I would get into this for like an hour and a half to 2 hours at some point, and when I have time to like.
We're not going to do that much time.
No, right. So I'll touch on it. Just touch on it quick. I mean, Ernst Junger was basically remembered by most people as being like a military historian. So a lot of his writings were on the 2 world wars, and so basically he died at 102 years old. He lived through 6 different iterations of German government in his life, and he fought in World War I. He wrote about it in Storm of Steel. He probably would have called himself libertarian or something along those lines through most of his life. By the time he wrote The Forest Passage in the 50s, he was basically making an anarchist or libertarian critique of communism and socialism. The Forest Passage or the Forest Rebel would be, the person who's subverting government, who's actually doing the action to try to take down what he sees as an illegitimate regime. By the time he wrote Humisville in 1977, he had pretty much gotten to the point where he passed all of that. And it's really the only dystopian sci-fi fiction novel that he wrote. And it's interesting that he wrote it all these years later. I won't get into the book too much. Like I said, I kind of promised Pete I would do that. But the general concept of the anarch as opposed to the anarchist is a good analogy would be like a monarch as opposed to a monarchist. So someone who is, rather than somebody who is trying to do something that is ideological. So the anarch would, within their own mind, they are already free, and they maneuver through the world in a way that they generally pull and push and give and take to kind of go by to get by, understanding the situation they're in and considering it all mostly a big joke. Regimes come and go, power comes and goes, people in charge of you eventually wither and die, and another person comes and becomes in charge of you. And you just sort of understand all of this is silly, and you're going to work on doing what you do in your own life and not pay any attention to it. It's the quickest way I could kind of sum up the idea of the anarch, that the anarchist is constantly chasing the thing that he or she is fighting against, and therefore becomes wrapped up in that path, never able to really explore their own. And the anarch eschews all of that, never wraps himself or herself up in a fight. It is all about internal peace, the internal dialogue, the ability to be mentally, emotionally, spiritually free because you choose it on your own. And so the main character in the book, Martin, or Manuel as he's later named, basically works for, I guess, what you could call like I guess the city is sort of ruled by this guy, the Condor, who's like a sort of a libertarian dictator, I guess is the best way to put it. And Martin sort of, he works as a bartender at night in this guy's palace, but he's also a historian who has access to a time machine. So he goes back in time and talks to communists and anarchists from the past, a couple of centuries. And it's mostly just his internal musings kind of on what he's thinking about the world and how he's trying to maneuver through the freedom, the internal freedom that he's created for himself, while his family is tied up in the democracy that existed before this current ruler, and they think he's a failure for doing what he's doing. And I heard, Reed, I heard you mention Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance when you were talking to Matt on the previous episode. And if you like the narrative structure of that book, you would like this. It's very similar to those sort of like philosophical musings. And in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, you're not really sure if the narrator is reliable or not. In this one, you're kind of more sold on a reliable narrator, so it's not as ambiguous, but it's very similar. So I guess that's the best I could do in like 5 minutes. But the idea that you can choose to be free while you are physically existing in a place where most people would say that you're not is really sort of a glorious evolution of thought. And if you can get there, I think it's aligned with a lot of spiritualness, a lot of spirituality, a lot of religions, a lot of meditation. There's a lot to it. And you don't really let the material world around you affect your day-to-day life. And I'll tell you that just for reference, the one time over the last 18 months, this really clicked with me, because I'd read this book a long time ago and then I reread it, but I don't know if I ever really lived it until this moment. I was considering leaving my restaurant job about 7 or 8 months before I actually left it. They had reinstated a mask mandate in the town that I worked in, which is not the town I live in. And I remember saying to my girlfriend, I'm not doing it. I haven't fucking worn a mask. I'm not putting a mask on to go to work. I'm not doing it. And she was like, okay, do whatever you want. And I was just stewing on this like all weekend. My weekend is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I'm like, I'm going to quit. I'm not wearing the fucking mask. And then I was like, what am I doing? Like, just put the fucking thing on, go in there, make $2,500 for 6 months, like a week, and then get out. Like, why would you take that money away from yourself? Because you're going to use that later to get yourself in a position where you never have to have this conversation in your head again. Like, why would I hurt my own outcome based on this weird fucking random principle? Why would I do that? And I realize I'm not living what I'm saying. Like, I need to think this through. And I know that's going to be a really weird analogy for people to hear, because they're like, what do you mean you're not living your principle? And I'm like, well, does it really matter? Did it really matter that much to do that? And it turns out I didn't really have to wear it anyway, but it was just a kind of an interesting mental exercise to go, it's really not that big of a deal. I'm not going to make a sacrifice in my life and possibly hurt my family for this very insignificant thing. Right. And so I don't know, that's probably the best way I could explain it real quick.
The thing I like about the idea of the anarch is you're following a person not into battle, but you're following a person into success. Right. So it's whenever I was younger, I remember getting involved and listening to the tapes from Amway, right? And one of the things that was attractive about that was the way that those that were speaking were leading, right? My favorite, there was a guy, I can't think of his name right now off the top of my head, but he had this saying, "It's not over until I win." And I was like, that's a guy you want to follow. That's a guy you want to be behind, because he would never quit. It's not over until I win. And it was just, and it was really enthralling. And when you talk about the anarch, that's what I think of. I think of a guy leading people into success. I think of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I think of, that kind of idealism, that kind of like mentality of showing people how to succeed. We're not going to show you how to fight a battle on the enemy's front. We're going to show you how to fight that battle in such a way that the enemy has no way of fighting back.
Well, I will say before we wrap up, I do want to kind of make a distinction that Junger would not agree with that. He would not be looking, or the character of the anarch that he is describing in the book would be very uncomfortable being followed by anybody. It is more kind of going on your path and being very hesitant to have anyone sort of look up to you, because you would then look inside and go, well, why is that person looking at me like that? It would make that character very uncomfortable. I think it probably does ancillarily provide some sort of archetype to follow. There's a lot of Nietzsche and Stirner in what Junger is describing, and he comes from the same German school. But while Nietzsche and Stirner would give you the same strong, independent, sort of focused type of human, they're also giving you a very different outcome, a very different action that human would take. And Junger's concept of the anarch is not somebody who is really doing anything other than just following their own path very quietly throughout the world. So there is a little bit of a distinction there. It might not necessarily be my way, but I just want to make the point that that's not what he's saying in that book.
Right.
Although, we could take it in any direction we want, I suppose.
Well, yeah, I know. I'm just thinking the example. Like, I'm not even thinking following as in physically following. I'm just following that example.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
for sure.
Being on the heels of that example. Reed, you got anything to add to this?
Yeah, sure. This is actually something with the post-libertarian crowd I see a lot is, you'll be the most principled one on the boxcar or whatever. That's a saying that's thrown around a lot. And then Adam was just talking about, the idea of why would I give up my job over this stupid thing, the mask idea. And I actually agree with what you're saying there. I think people are not honest with themselves about what their principles are. They're willing to make grandiose statements about what they would be willing to go through to avoid doing something. And then when the rubber hits the road, they never do it.
Adam Kokesh getting the vaccine.
Yeah. Did he get the vaccine?
He did. He posted pictures of it on Twitter the other day. He was like, okay, y'all bullied me into it. I'm like, nobody bullied you, dude. You chose to go.
Oh, that wasn't satire?
No, he went and got the vaccine.
Huh. Well, anyway,
I'm just making it as a point. I still like Adam Kokesh. I would still talk with him. I'm just saying, like.
That is funny, though. I thought that was satire. I think I saw that before I got banned. But I think you should be honest with yourself, what your principles are. And I think you should be willing to end up on a boxcar for what your actual principles are. Bonhoeffer ended up on a boxcar. I would have done the same thing he did, or I hope I would have. I just think that we lie to ourselves about what our principles are. And I know that there's, that's not the entirety of that, the meaning behind that saying. They also mean, like if you're going to let your enemies get away with murder and you're not going to do anything to protect yourself, eventually they'll murder you and you'll be able to say, haha, look at me. I followed my principles to the T. I understand that that's the meaning behind the saying, but just in light of what Adam was just talking about, I think it's important to be honest with yourself about what really does matter to you. What would you actually put your foot down for, and stop shooting your mouth off about how you're going to, I'm going to die for liberty, or, over my dead body. It's like, probably not. I don't think that the government's very afraid of that saying anymore, over my dead body. This whole thing, everyone talking about, if they come for my guns, that'll be my red line. I'll not let them do that. I'll die before it. You've just let every red line be crossed, and you haven't done anything to stop anything.
Look at what happened in Waco, and tell me that the government's afraid of you.
Yeah, I know.
And I know David Thibodeau. I'm friends with David Thibodeau. I text him right now if I wanted to. Like, honestly, tell me the fucking government's afraid of you, that they're not going to fucking do that to you. That pisses me off more than anything. Like they do this regularly. And what's fucked up, and this is kind of like a side fucking thing, is my own goddamn mind. What's fucked up is the first ATF officer to get shot off the roof and die in Waco went to high school with my mom.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm friends with David Thibodeau at the moment. Like, so it's like, yeah, tell me that they're fucking afraid of you.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Sorry, finish what you were saying. That just drives me crazy. Over my dead body. Yeah, man, fucking they burned fucking children, you fucking cunts.
Yeah. So I think by claiming you would die for everything that you really wouldn't die for, you actually devalue the things that you should stand up for, because you're so used to saying you'd put it all on the line for this when in reality you wouldn't. So, actually be honest about what things are really worth losing your freedom over or losing your life over, and then stand by those things. Stop pretending that they're the things that you really won't stand up for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What I really love about that is when you're honest enough to be able to say that, like Reed just did, or I've done, or you, Tommy, and people look up to you, probably more so you than me, but you have people that look up to you and they see somebody say that, and it gives them this personal permission to agree when they probably wanted to anyway, but they were afraid their small little social circle would be upset with that, right? Because they're supposed to drive this hard bargain all the time about the ideology they believe in. So when they see somebody that they trust say something reasonable, like you just did, Reed, I think that can actually help push the conversation forward to a more productive place, because there are things that I would rather not do that I will clearly do when I'm making an in the moment value judgment about what's more important to me, right? Like if it comes down between putting a mask on in the grocery store or like losing my girlfriend or dog, like that is a very easy choice. And like, obviously we would agree. I don't give a shit what anybody on Twitter thinks about that, because I have to come home to my loved ones every night and be able to sleep with my decision-making ability. I don't know why that's so difficult for people to articulate in general, but hopefully hearing this and hearing you say that will help them to the point where they can be a little bit more honest about it and feel comfortable expressing that idea. I think it would move this forward exponentially in this space.
Yeah. And if your red line is wearing a mask, if you're willing to throw everything out for that, power to you. And I guess there are some people who would do that, but just if that's not you, stop pretending it is. Just be honest with yourself about what your line is.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. We all have responsibilities. I have kids, I mean, granted, most of my kids are out of the house and, grown now, and I'm not paying child support or anything like that on them. But, I still have a granddaughter. I have kids. I have things going on. Reed, you have things going on, and anybody who thinks it's unrealistic, and we'll wrap after this. Anybody who thinks it's unrealistic to say, make more money, don't be poor. Look at Reed, man. He's a blue collar worker. He's 28 years old. He's making 6 figures a year. Like, don't tell me you can't figure this out. Like, you're capable of figuring this out. If you can't,
I can do it.
Well, yeah, I wasn't going to go there, but yeah, if he can do it, geez. But hey, man, I appreciate both you guys coming on here and having this conversation. I knew it would be a fun conversation. I knew it'd be a good in-depth conversation, and there's a lot of meat here. And if people can't get shit out of this conversation, then they need to quit listening to podcasts, because I don't know what else to do for them. So
you can only do so much, my man.
Plug away, Adam.
Go to yertalkinoverme.com, YER talking no G over me.com. You pretty much figure it out from there. It's a podcast. It's on YouTube. If you want to watch it with video, you got to pay me. You don't have to pay me. I really don't need your money. So just listen to it for free. If you want to see my face, you can see it on Tommy's show. So
no, you can't.
Do what you got to do. If you, the one cool thing people could do is just leave 5 stars on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. That does actually help me way more than it does giving me your money.
So that would be cool. And then just, hit me up on Twitter, DM me, send me an email. You're talking over me at protonmail.com. I like to hear from people. I do hear from a lot of people, and it's always a cool conversation that comes out of it. So, yeah, that's it.
And Reed, your plugs, man.
Yeah, so I'm recently banned from Twitter. That was kind of my central hub.
I was going to ask where to find you on Twitter too.
Yeah, I'm actually, if you see any Reed Coverdale on Twitter, it's not me, because I'm not there. There have been a few people impersonating me. None of them are me, just letting you guys know. Yeah, follow me on YouTube. I am the Naturalist Capitalist. If you type in Reed Coverdale, there will also be another channel that shows up that actually has more subscribers than the Naturalist Capitalist, because that's my channel where my Garand video went viral. It has over 3 million views over there, but that's actually my personal YouTube channel. I don't do any political content over there. So make sure it's the Naturalist Capitalist that you subscribe to. But if the Naturalist Capitalist gets banned, I'll probably be migrating over to the Reed Coverdale channel. So you can subscribe to both if you want. And in light of what Adam was talking about with the anarch, I can still look at Twitter. I just can't interact. And it's like a funeral wake on there for me. Like, Jesus Christ, people, like, I didn't die. I'm just not on Twitter. Please, pick up the torch where I left off. If you're on Twitter and you like the taking on the neocons and APAC and whatever, just do it yourself. Like, the true sign of success would be if I had people trying to emulate me after I left, not just being super sad that I'm gone. So stop crying about it. Just pick up where I left off, keep giving them shit. And thanks for doing this, guys. This was great.
Right.
I think it would be really funny if everybody who followed you just went on and created a Reed Coverdale profile on Twitter. So there was just like 20,000 Reed Coverdales all over Liberty Twitter, just fucking with everybody.
Great idea.
I thought Reed Coverdale's mustache was really his mustache. I didn't know.
Yeah, well, I don't run it. My mustache does. So.
All right, guys. I love you both, man. I really appreciate y'all coming on. I'm glad we could have this conversation, because I know this wasn't the easiest thing for either of you, but this was awesome. I hope y'all both feel the same way.
No, it was great. I appreciate you both, gentlemen. Thank you very much for doing this. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, Twitter's not real life, guys. So everyone on Twitter, stop, just kind of cut it out.
And become the anarch today.
Out.
Okay, Uncle Joey showed up. That's it. It's over.
That's it.
Said you're just a slave. All your good intentions took you to your grave. Your pride is how they killed you. With the flag you wave just like a fool. They promised you a mountain, gifted you a stone. They demanded that you throw it into your neighbor's home, and then seize all that they worked for and give it to the throne just like a tool. Well, as we all just stand in line and glorify new ways of being cruel, it seems to me humanity is not something that they're teaching us in school. They dumbed us down all around, propaganda, their pollution. They set a cage up on the stage, a facade for all solution. They build a wall, block them all from this mental institution. It's insane. Now they're writing their own rule books and they're crossing all their T's. They're fashioning their people to all wear beggars' knees. If justify these crimes done in our names. It seems to me authority and tyranny are both one and the same. Well, it's time to change the channel. It's time to set things right. Make them all rot with fear in their beds at night. Devour all their worthless souls and sacrificial right, just like we should. Cause this world it needs a cleansing to burn away the shame and destroy all the remnants of those who are to blame. And we'll stack them up like cordwood, watch them sizzle on the flames for good. Well, as we all just stand in line waiting for some kind of Robin Hood, our liberty will never be until our right to freedom is understood.